Hello, welcome to Why Wait Till Sunday. I'm your host, Alfred, and this is going to be a little bit of a new direction for the show. The regular season of college football wrapped up last week, and we are thinking forward now to the off season. Of course, Dynasty Devy never really stops you around. We're going to transition into talking a little bit more about Devy rankings, ranking these college players for their, NFL future, for their fantasy future. And then we're also going to have some guests on in the offseason, talk about depth charts, what we can expect going into next season. And so we're going to get away from the DFS because we're not going to have games to actually roll out lineups. And look at this year. Rookies came in and are on a ton of championship teams. I would imagine at least one rookie is on almost any championship team. You've got running backs who are blowing up here right when you need it the most. Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, etc. So I think it really pays to know these rookies well from the moment they get drafted, because then you can start knowing, how do I want to play this? Even in redraft, these guys are valuable. You don't just have to wait, down the line 3 years and, I only care about that in Dynasty. No, these guys are important every single format. And so the more we know, the more we are comfortable with these names, what they can produce for us, then when it's time to actually make that call on draft day, we can do it confidently. So that's what we're going to do to prepare everyone watching this for any kind of draft that they may be in. And so this week, what we're going to do is a quick rundown on my rankings. I try to update these rankings about twice a month in season. And now, the dust has settled, and we're going to go over some risers and fallers and talk about what this means for the future. So for quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, still definitely top tier all by themselves. They are elite, game-changing quarterbacks, and you should have no problem going ahead and selecting one of them for your team, whether it's single QB or, super flex. They're going to be pick 1 and pick 2 in every single rookie draft. Even in single QB for Dynasty, usually the rosters are bigger and teams are rostering more than one QB, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, depending on your Dynasty setup. So I've come to realize that even in single QB Dynasty, quarterback actually can be important. I mean, it's not like your typical redraft where the waivers are just full of a million options to mix and match and stream. So even in Dynasty, if the rosters are deep enough and people are rostering QBs and there's not enough on the waivers, you could consider these guys at the back end of the first round, I think, because I believe they are total team-changing quarterbacks. And just as a personal note, 2 years ago when the rookie class was a little bit weak, I took a bunch of Kyler Murray in single QB late in the first pick of the second round type thing, and have obviously been extremely satisfied and happy with that. And the reason that I did it was that I saw Murray as the highest possible upside at that point in the draft. So even though he was a quarterback, given his running ability and good arm, etc., he was a guy who could break the game. And he did do that for the first half of this year. I mean, he was breaking the game. Lamar Jackson broke quarterback scoring in 2019. So I saw him as, a huge upside guy, even though I typically wouldn't value quarterbacks. So, Lawrence and Fields potentially are that type of guy. And so even in single QB Dynasty, I think there's a discussion to be had at the end of the first. So these guys are important no matter your format. Trey Lance, has been hovering in this area. I wouldn't say he's a really big riser, but he is now, I think, firmly for me, QB3 in the class. And it's just because of the rushing upside. I think it's guaranteed he's going to be a top 15 pick. So he's going to have plenty of draft capital. Whoever selects him is going to see him as the future, probably going to start him very early on in his career, season 1, midway through season 1, maybe day 1, I'm not sure. But it's the rushing potential. You do not have to be Peyton Manning with your arm to be a fantasy relevant or fantasy, stud in most formats, because look at Tim Tebow. That guy was a lock and load QB1 when he was starting. He is one of the worst passers we've ever seen as a starting quarterback in the NFL, but because he contributed so much on the ground, he was the team's goal line running back, essentially. That will cover up a ton of problems in the passing game. I was looking the other day. I mean, I think he cracked 200 yards passing like once or twice in the entire season he started for the Broncos. It didn't matter. He was routinely at 20 points, 20 fantasy points per week. So you've got to separate out what you think about his real life QB prospects and say for fantasy, if he is going to run for 70 to 80 plus yards a game, which I think Trey Lance in the right system should be that kind of guy. For fantasy, behind the elites, that's the guy I'd want to take a stab at, even if there's potential worry about his arm or, is he going to throw for 300 yards? I don't care. The running game is an absolute game changer. Zach Wilson, obviously been a huge riser this year. He is now my QB4. A faller is Keaton Slovis. I've loved him. There's just something when you watch him this year, at least. I mean, the offense was kind of ugly. He's now my QB3 in the 2022 class. Howell's jumped him, and even Spencer Rattler's jumped him, who's been really kind of quietly excellent for Oklahoma. The stats and the obscene 300, 400-yard games are not there for Rattler, but he's incredibly accurate. It's his first year starting. I think he's the world, he's got the world at his fingertips there. And Slovis just comes in at QB3 for me. I still really like him. His pocket management and awareness is really second to none, but the arm just doesn't quite seem there. I mean, I think maybe he's like a Drew Brees-esque guy. Drew Brees ceiling. He's not going to run for us in fantasy. And so you're hoping for pinpoint perfect accuracy and high volume, which I hope he gets. I mean, I think he's a very good quarterback. I'm a little bit wary of the fantasy ceiling with him now, and everything we're doing here is related to fantasy. Another big riser is Desmond Ridder. He's now my QB13 overall in the Devy rankings and comes in after Mac Jones and Kyle Trask in this next class, assuming he declares. And that's been a big rise. He actually needed to be added to the system just this past week. So, not really on many people's radar heading into the season, probably, other than, a deep sleeper pick. Some people were talking about him, but he is now my QB7 in this next class. And if he gets day 2 draft capital, even maybe second round, I mean, Jalen Hurts was a bit of a surprise in the second round, I think. It's that running ability for fantasy. I don't care if there's some deficiencies in his arm. I just don't care. If he's going to be given the keys to an offense, I'm in on Desmond Ridder in the NFL. Even if he lacks a little bit of what you'd like to see as a passer, he's aggressive and he can absolutely chip in 70 to 80 yards. I mean, there's a big bar. I think, a lot of quarterbacks can get to 30, maybe 40 yards. That is like an Aaron Rodgers, Andrew Luck type guy. When you've got someone who can hit 75, 80 yards, obviously that's like Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Trey Lance would fall into there, I think, and Desmond Ridder, I think, would fall into there. Think about that. 40 yards to 80 yards, 4 points given normal scoring. That's a whole touchdown. That's an entire passing touchdown that you would need from a guy like Slovis. It's such a game changer. It really is. You cannot overestimate how big of a deal rushing for that type of yardage will be for fantasy. So that's why Desmond Ridder's up there for me. And if he gets day 2 draft capital, I'm going to be all over it, really in any format, but especially in Superflex. And then we've got Dustin Crum for Kent State. He's coming back. So in your C2C leagues, if you're playing actual fantasy in college, he's going to be elite. He was incredible this year. I mean, I know it's Kent State, but like Trey Lance tore up North Dakota State's schedule and he's going to be a top 10 pick. Dustin Crum is tearing up FBS competition, even if it's in the MAC. And he's an afterthought. I think he's really, really good. I mean, he has been incredibly accurate. He has avoided turnovers and he runs. I mean, the guy runs the read option and looks pretty darn good doing it. He's not Lamar Jackson, but running is a legitimate part of his game. And I think him for Kent State, he's coming back for his next year. If he's really good, I don't think the NFL is going to mind that he's a 5th-year senior. He could sneak into day 2 if he's this good once again next year, and I would imagine that he will. Let's see. Grayson McCall is now on the list. He is a QB 23 for me. Probably by the end of the offseason, he's going to be a little higher. He's a redshirt freshman from Coastal Carolina. And again, you just love these guys that are going to be the dual threat. He's been very accurate this year. He led his team to an undefeated season and a, argument to be considered in a playoff and beat a legitimate team in BYU, even though the rest of their schedule was a little bit iffy. And so he's very interesting. I mean, it is Coastal Carolina. He's going to have a long way to go to get, the draft capital that we are going to need to see coming out of Coastal Carolina, but he's got at least one more year and maybe two to do this again and or improve. And so, it's not out of the question he can be day two. Coming out of Coastal Carolina, it seems insane to think he'd be a first-round pick. But we've seen it before. I mean, Carson Wentz was a first-round pick. Trey Lance is going to be a very high pick from North Dakota State. So it's certainly not impossible, but he is going to have to light it up for the Chanticleers. And then that will do it for kind of the update with quarterbacks. I mean, those I touched on some high guys. We can't go over every single one, but I do have top 25 quarterbacks ranked over at DLF. Let's get into the running backs real quick. Najee Harris is still my number one. Travis Etienne is still my number two. Breece Hall has, I always liked him, but he is now my running back 3 overall in Devy rankings. Number 1 for his class, which should be 2022. And I tweeted out this week, I mean, I don't have a problem saying Breece Hall is the Devy RB1. He has been incredible from the moment he stepped on the field as an 18-year-old freshman. I think people said, oh, yeah, well, as Iowa State, they had nobody else, so they had to feed him last year in 2019, which is silly because these are Power 5 teams. They have a depth chart, okay? If a freshman comes in and dominates the use, you have to take notice. And then so this year, he has been even more incredible. I mean, he's got long speed. He's got vision, juking. He receives the ball out of the backfield as well. I mean, he's everything you want. I mean, he's from Iowa State, but it's still the Big 12. It's still Power 5, and he's just incredible. I mean, he had like 8 games in a row of 1,000 or 100 yards this year before, falling back to like 95 and 92 in 2 games. So he's got the size you would want, 215 pounds, I think, and just looks awesome. He just looks awesome. So I think there's an argument that he could be the RB1 simply because of the early production and the consistent improvement in year 2. And if he does it again in year 3, I mean, he's just going to be an incredible draft pick and a high draft pick. So let's see. And Bijan Robinson, this is not going to be a huge surprise, not a hot take, but maybe as high as I do have him. He's now my RB4, first guy in tier 2 behind Harris, Etienne, and Hall. And I love him. What he showed, I mean, he has forced the issue at Texas as a true freshman. And then he went just, I mean, absolutely insane in one of their last games, well over 200 yards. I think he had 3 touchdowns, and Keontae Ingram's been injured, and now he's rumored to, be going into the transfer portal maybe. And so, I mean, he kicked out 2 incumbent running backs and is just an absolute stud. He's got it all, size, speed, you name it. He was the number 1 recruit in the country. Like, he didn't come out of nowhere, but he's just confirming what we thought he might be. And Tank Bigsby, another freshman who's just been absolutely incredible for Auburn in the SEC. He's now my RB5 ahead. Both of these guys jumped Kenneth Gainwell, who has weight concerns at the next level. Javonte Williams, of course, like everybody, he's jumped way, way up. Between him and Kenneth Gainwell, I'm still juggling them back and forth. I think he's gonna wind up. I mean, let's just do it right now. I'm gonna put him ahead of Gainwell. But both of these guys have some flaws and some question marks. Williams, I think, with just his, 1 year of production, although he was really good as a sophomore too. And just sharing a backfield with Michael Carter. I mean, I always have questions when, if he's so good, why did they feel the need to split it? Now, Michael Carter is good too, but, it's just, for me, the depth chart in the NFL is just going to be way different than the UNC depth chart. If he couldn't separate from even a very good Michael Carter, is he going to be able to separate from a very good, Keyshawn Vaughn? All these guys are very good in the NFL. So is he going to be able to separate from a very good Boston Scott type person or whatever? So it tells me, are there deficiencies that we don't quite know about? How does the coaching staff view him that they want to work in Michael Carter so much? And they were almost an exact 50-50 split. So yeah, I mean, if he goes to the NFL and dominates workhorse role, it's great. The question is, can he, does he have all the tools that are going to be necessary to do that? Because he didn't quite do that at UNC. Gainwell, we've got weight issues. Eric Gray's been a little bit up and down, but he's really taken over kind of as a workhorse in the last, half of the season, multiple 100-yard games. And, I think he's RB10 overall for me. I think he's got a bright future. Gonna need to see him absolutely dominate. I think now that Ty Chandler should be gone next year. And with Harrison Bailey, that offense could look very, very good. Chuba Hubbard, major faller. Kyron Williams, major riser. They are right next to each other now. Jace McClellan is on the map right now. He's my RB27. He's a true freshman. And, even just getting on the field for Bama as a true freshman, and he just looks like it has it all. He's got the size. He's got breakaway speed. He's had 2 really long runs already this year. I really like him, and very good chance, depending on how Trey Sanders returns from his injuries and whether or not Brian Robinson, I guess, leaves, because everyone can come back, even though I think he's a senior. We'll see. I think there's a pretty decent chance he's the lead dog next year as a true sophomore at Alabama. If he does that, I mean, rubber stamp that thing. He's going to be huge at the next level. Max Borghi, huge follower. He's now RB31. I mean, almost an afterthought. I think he's going to be not going to have any draft capital. He's a receiving third down back at best, I think. All right. I think that's some updates there. Nothing too shocking. But some of these freshmen, I mean, the 2023 class just looks absolutely insane. Receivers, as always, there's a lot of juggling. Jamar Chase is still my number 1. Rondale Moore is now my number 2. I mean, I wanted to see, like we all did, how's he going to come back from injury? And he just came back like he never, ever had a layoff. I mean, he walked into a 40% market share, 32% of the receiving yards. He was just being force-fed targets immediately after like a 18-month layoff. I mean, just walked right into David Bell's living room and ate his dinner. I mean, David Bell's still very good, but like game 1, he dwarfed David Bell in target share. He commands it. And so to me, that just, he is who we thought he was. He can be a high volume guy, despite his size. He doesn't, jet sweeps. He's going to get rushing stuff. He's going to be an absolute weapon. And I think NFL teams now know how to use these weapons. And, he's small-ish, but like, I think he's 5'8", 5'9", over 180 pounds. I think he's going to probably come into the combine over 180. So the BMI is there, even though the whole stature may be a little undersized, but, weight to height, ratio is fine to me. And I just think he's proven the most. He's already back from injury. The next guy, Jalen Waddle, we don't know what his injury, return is going to look like. He was still limping on the sideline, I think, when I saw in the SEC championship game last night. But I'm very excited about Waddle. And then Devonta Smith. I mean, he's just forced himself in. I've had him much, much lower. I can't do it anymore. He's now the wide receiver 4 for me. He is in tier 1 for me. I just can't deny what he's done this year. I still have questions about, his weight, but not even the weight. It is the BMI. It's the whole package. It's the fact that he's 6'1", 170 something. He's not, 5'9", 170 something. He's tall, taller and kind of skinny. But even setting that aside, I was sending out a tweet the other day about this. He's also a 4th-year senior. And that just, if we're saying he is going to be the wide receiver 1 taken in the NFL draft, he's going to be the rookie wide receiver 1. And, you want with that pick. I mean, he could be as high as like 104. I mean, after the first couple running backs and in single QB leagues, first couple running backs, he could be as high as 103 if someone likes him that much. And in Superflex, he's going to be 106, 107 after the quarterbacks and the top two running backs, Etienne and Harris. Javonte Williams could go ahead of him if someone's really desperate for a running back, but he's going to be at worst a mid first round pick. I just the profile you're kind of using that pick to hope he's honestly a unicorn, and maybe he is. He's going to break yardage marks. He's going to potentially win the Heisman. That's a unicorn dude. I mean, a wide receiver to win the Heisman, that alone says he's a once in a generation guy. Wide receivers don't win the Heisman. So if he does that, he's tracking to be a unique specimen. But I looked at the list of even the top 12 receivers this year. The only ones that, did not come out early were Tyler Lockett, who's great, but do you want to spend the first round, mid-round pick on Tyler Lockett's future? Do you want Adam Thielen? Maybe, but you're going to have to wait, a couple of years. You're going to get a peak. But Adam Thielen, you could take the risk on him. Here's a free agent pickup in like every league. I mean, I don't even think he would have been drafted even in extremely deep Devy leagues, probably not drafted. I mean, he was probably scooped off the scrap heap. That profile just doesn't pop at the next level. And, I know that there are going to be tape watchers and things like that say, you're just wrong. He does it. I don't know. Fourth year senior, the track record over recent history as people do leave early is just short. Combine that with a fairly slight frame. And I can't put him up there. I'd rather Chase Moore Waddle over Devonta Smith, but he did force his way into top 4 receivers for me, but I wouldn't ever draft him if I have him there because everyone else is going to have him higher. All right, that's a lot about Devonta Smith. Rashad Bateman is a faller for me. He's out of tier 1. He was as high as 2, but that offense didn't look great. I rely on people who watch a lot of film and know a lot of technique. He's got some issues maybe with body catching, with top end speed, which top end speed I do think is a little overrated. Some of these guys down there, Hopkins doesn't have incredible top end speed, and he's still an absolutely elite receiver. I want volume receivers to catch chunk gains, 10 to 15 yards, like 10 catches for 10 to 15 yards is really how I want my alpha receiver to be, not 3 catches for, 99 yards. I don't need that top end speed, but there's just a little bit of, he's just not as much of a lock to me anymore. So he falls out of tier 1. He's still wide receiver 5. I do think there's a bit of a gap. Almost he's in his own tier. I think there's a bit of a gap between him and Dyami Brown, who's the next guy, and a bit of a riser for me. But I really have liked Dyami Brown a lot. And, when it's all said and done, it's kind of crazy. He's going to be like my wide receiver 6 in this class. I haven't even seen him in the top 10 for a lot of other people, which is, it's just insane. What has he not done? He's going to go back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons as a sophomore and a junior, lead his team in receiving as a sophomore and a junior, over 30% of the market share. Like, what do you, and this class is so loaded, but what else do you want from any prospect? He dominated the receiving room at a major school and put up raw numbers. He put up percent numbers of his team's passing attempts. Everything you could want. He is a volume guy. He was a deep threat guy. He was all of the above. And I just think he's incredible and still very, very underrated for most people. I finally saw, I think Fusu had him maybe top 10. I think it was Fusu. And it's the first time I had seen anyone else have him in the top 10. He's my 6. Let's see. Garrett Wilson's been a riser. He's now my wide receiver 1 in 2022 class over Pickens, over David Bell. He's just been incredible. Seth Williams is a faller for me. He's now my wide receiver 10 in this coming class. I think we do need to give him a little bit of a pass. Bo Nix is just dreadful as a quarterback, and Seth still did produce, but yeah, just some other guys just kind of like, supersonic, leapfrogged him. A big riser for me, and this is a guy I really liked. He was one of my sleeper Saturdays in the offseason. Is Treylon Burks, and he wasn't even on a lot of people's radar. I identified him as a potential stud coming into this year because as a true freshman, he returned punts at 230 pounds. I mean, honestly, what else do you need to see? Like a physical freak returning punts as a true freshman in the SEC. I mean, this wasn't even at uh, you know, I don't know, Kent State or something like that. This was in the SEC. Yes, it's a doormat program in the SEC, but still, those depth charts are pretty good, even for anybody in the SEC. And he forced his way. They used him for a pretty decent amount of rushing attempts as a freshman. He led the team in receiving, even though it was only like 450 yards. He still led the team in receiving as a freshman. So some people like some of the other players, and I said, I mean, why isn't it Treylon Burks? And this year, he's just been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. He's now my wide receiver 3 in 2021. He is ahead of George Pickens, who looks pretty good, but has not dominated. In fact, has ceded work to a true freshman, Jermaine Burton. Even as JT Daniels came in and kind of revamped that passing attack. I mean, Karis Jackson led the team in receiving this year. So, he was kind of second, and then Jermaine Burton came in. I mean, I have a little concerns about this guy. He displays some incredible tools, but for one reason or another, he didn't just command this year, despite a very strong finish to his freshman season. Kayshon Boutte is now my wide receiver 1 in the 2023 class. I don't think that's a shock, but he wasn't as high for me until Terrace Marshall opted out, and he immediately jumped into the alpha role and has just been insane. If you did not catch last night's game against Ole Miss, sit down for this, he had 300 yards receiving. 300 as a true freshman. I don't care if it was against Ole Miss. He had 300 yards receiving as a true freshman in the SEC against an SEC opponent. This guy's special. He is my wide receiver 16 overall, and that may not be high enough. Tamorrion Terry's been a faller. That FSU team's just a total wreck. But you just don't like to see a guy fade into obscurity. I mean, I understand there are team issues there, but he's kind of raw anyway, and then just kind of faded away this year. And I know FSU's had a lot of problems, but, that's concerning to me. He's probably going to destroy the combine and get a lot of hype, but he's also older. He's going to be a fourth-year player. I think he's a redshirt junior. I just have some concerns there. Another big riser for the 2023 class is Jordan Addison for Pittsburgh. He is my wide receiver 3 in that class now. He was just ridiculous. It kind of came out of nowhere. 6.3 receptions per game as a true freshman. That's bonkers in college. That alone says he is tracking on elite future for Pittsburgh. Of course, he led his team in receiving, but 6.3 receptions per game. That is a high volume for a true freshman who made basically a position switch to take over as a wide receiver. It's not like he jumped in and was, catching passes from Justin Fields or something like that. I mean, it was Pittsburgh and just came in and immediately dominated. Love to see that. Drake London, another riser. He's looking like the wide receiver 2 in LA as a true sophomore behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's a very good receiver, but he's actually the yardage leader. I don't think he's the reception leader, but he's the yardage leader for USC. And, that volume is just really impressive. He plays a lot in the slot. I think he can potentially be like this kind of jumbo slot. I mean, Juju came out of there before Drake London. But, for a true sophomore to push ahead of Tyler Vaughns, who's been there for a long, long time, and to push ahead of, even Amon-Ra St. Brown, he hasn't jumped him in receptions, but he's jumped him in yardage. That says something. That says something as a true sophomore to come in and be at least neck and neck with a potential first round, high second round pick in St. Brown. That's a big deal. So he is very, very exciting, and now jumps in. I think he's my wide receiver 6 in the class for 2022, and that may be higher than consensus. I'm not sure, but certainly a big riser for me. Let's see. And then some guys who are kind of just jumping onto the map for the first time. Zay Flowers for Boston College. He pushed about 30% of a market share as a true sophomore. So definitely want to keep an eye on him. And Khalil Shakir for Boise State, a junior who really kind of broke out as a sophomore with 20% of his team's production. And now about 40% of Boise State's receiving production this year. That's what you want to see, even if it's considered a bit of a late breakout. 40%. I mean, that's what you want to see. You want to, even if it's a late breakout, you want to see it to be a massive breakout. I don't think he'll come out, so he'll end up being a senior wide receiver. So and he's not going to be a high draft pick. Maybe day 3 probably, and then maybe round 3, which would be a little bit better. But he's even when he jumps into the rookie pool for us, he's not going to be a high value guy. But let's not forget that a 40% breakout is huge, almost no matter what year you do it. But he didn't even do it as a senior; it's true junior. I think he's definitely got a profile we need to pay attention to. And, he's not even on some people's lists at all. So I think it's a name to keep in mind for next season if he doesn't declare this season, which isn't impossible. And there you have it. I mean, those are the risers. There's been some followers. CJ Johnson, I'll make a note. It was very high on him, but he just kind of evaporated this year. He still caught a bunch of touchdowns, but his volume was way down for Eastern Carolina. And, that's concerning, considering he wasn't a, elite prospect pedigree. I don't know what happened. The quarterback did not change, I don't think. So I'm just not really sure what happened to CJ Johnson. But, I mean, at this point, he's probably not even tracking to be an early declare out of ECU. And that's all very concerning for his future. So he's fallen quite a bit here to wide receiver 34. He would need a monster season as a junior to save some face there and maybe even think about jumping into the NFL draft. A watch list guy I've already put in for him to be added to the system, but Jaden Walley is a true freshman from Mississippi State. He was a 4-star, so he's got some pedigree, and then he has a breakout. I mean, he's going to hit 20%, maybe. I don't think he's going to get to 30% of the receiving production, but over 20% as a true freshman puts you squarely on the map. For us, 4 straight 100-yard games to end the season. And this is an offense that spreads it around. They do not necessarily focus on one guy. And now towards the end of the season, he is just destroying the rest of the depth chart. I mean, 4 straight 100-yard games. I don't think anyone else even has one for this team. He is no doubt the top dog, and you love to have that going on as a true freshman. We're going to get to tight ends. Kyle Pitts is still my number 1. Brevin Jordan has risen for me. He's now my 3. Eric Gilbert, what he's done at LSU as a true freshman, has the pedigree, everything you want. He is now my tight end 4. Hunter Long's been a nice little riser. He had 22% market share, I think, last year. This year, he led the team in receiving once again. Quality player, I think. He's my tight end 7 overall, and I think would be my tight end 5, assuming Charlie Kohler is going to be a part of this tight end class. And I think he's definitely a nice guy. He doesn't have some of the athletic freak upside that like Kyle Pitts and Brevin Jordan do, but I think he's going to be a nice player in the NFL. And then Jaleel Billingsley for Alabama. He's going to need to climb for me. I've got him, kind of buried just on, prospect pedigree and the fact that he's at Alabama. But I think he's shown enough this year, that he's a weapon. And he needs to jump up. Let's see. I think we need to put him. Let's put him right behind Cade Otton, who's been very, very good for Washington and been their leading receiver. Anytime a tight end is a leading receiver for a Power 5 conference team, we need to pay very close attention. So I think Cade Otton can stay above, but Billingsley just jumped for me. We did this live up to tight end 11. He's behind a quartet here of the Hunter Long, Brant Kuthi, which I still like at Utah, Jake Ferguson, Cade Otton, and Jaleel Billingsley comes in at tight end 11 in the Devy ranks. Okay, we're trying to make this kind of quick, so we're going to end it there. Those are the positional rankings and the risers and fallers, but we always want to be thinking ahead. What's our 2021 class look like? What does our 2022 class look like? And 2023, because these guys, you need to know when you're talking about picks, is a 2021 first round pick may not be the same as a 2022 first round pick, or usually first round picks are going to be all pretty good, but second and third in 2021, a second round pick is gold. In 2022, I think a second round pick is much less valuable. So we want to pay attention to that. Looking ahead, going down the line is all very important. And so that's our first Devy rankings review. We're going to keep doing that on a fairly regular basis, even in the off season as we progress and process. We'll do probably some rookie highlights, because even in Devy, that's important for rookie rankings, especially on unrostered rookies that you're going to be able to take in your Devy drafts. Thanks for tuning in, and we will keep this coming. We are going to transition out of only DFS and still provide you guys with some important information. And I hope you like and subscribe below. And go ahead and follow me on Twitter at AL_FF_RED. We'll see you next time.